So welcome back to the Narrowbox comic channel. As you can see, this is not a comic, but I am about to launch my first comic for Narrowbox, and it is called Intrepid, and it is the story of two astronauts who find themselves transported across the distant universe to a part of space that's ran by a civilization called the Veyron, and in that civilization, there are a lower class or lower caste species called the Anode. And obviously they are humanoid. They are human in appearance, but they're very, very different to us. And this comes into play as the story goes on, as the two astronauts from Earth have to figure out a way to exist in this new reality with no way of getting home. And writing this story has been absolutely fantastic. I've really enjoyed the experience of it. It's been hard because I'm more of an artist than a writer, and I'm doing my best. But the thing that's really kept me going through this is the stories. The stories that I took in my youth, and this is one of those stories. Buck Rogers, season 1. I remember watching this with my mum, sitting on the couch watching it. The introduction was one of the first intros to a TV show that just hooked me, absolutely hooked me. Because when we were growing up in the 80s, we often witnessed like the space shuttle taking off, NASA specials on TV, and always around a launch. It was always cool stuff going on like that. And we had because there was only 4 channels, people had a shared experience when these things came on. It's like, oh, did you watch that special? Yeah, we watched that special. Did you watch Magnum PI the other night? Did you see that? Oh, who shot JR? We had these massive moments in pop culture in the 1980s that were huge. And everyone knows where they were because we all were watching the same things. Now, you scoot forward to today's time, it's a little bit different. So when I've been writing Intrepid, I've been thinking about it in terms of this. It's like I want to avoid the nostalgia trap. I wanted to avoid the nostalgia trap, but I wanted to also bring a little bit of that optimism and that excitement to the modern day. Because one of the things that happened in the 1980s, you had Star Wars come out and Star Trek. They were two very different properties, but many low rent, low budget cinema producers, movie producers would just copy wholesale big chunks out of this one, chunks out of that one, and they would often just, the characters in the storyline would often be just forgotten. But Buck Rogers in the 25th century was something different. It tried to cash in on Star Trek and Star Wars. It was, I believe it was an Aaron Spelling production, but the concept of it was very simple. A NASA astronaut on a one-man solo mission gets frozen and then wakes up in the future. And the entire world is very, very different. So basically, it's just a man out of time trope set in space. And the thing that made it really good was it was good for kids. I remember we had the Panini sticker albums for it. We had toys. It was a really well put together TV show, and it just hit the audience. We also had a guest spot from Gary Coleman that was in Different Strokes, which was one of the biggest comedy sitcoms in America in the era. And that used to play on British TV as well. So we had all of that. So again, it was all shared values. And the idea of what made a hero was shared across the platforms on like the TV. So a hero in one show would have the same values as a hero in another show. And that's important because that was one of the things that, I grew up, I saw what a heroic person looked like. The ideals of American culture at that time. But not just American culture, but any culture. And that was the thing. It was the most inclusive television that you could hope for, because we all had similar values across the sea. There was a country that was just like England, but slightly different. a place that I could go, like Buck Rogers has gone into the future and exist. Buck can go into the future and exist. And that was one of the things that's been really hard to write inspirationally and update into the modern culture, because Star Trek and Star Wars have been so pervasive on our culture. But really, for me, this little cash in on both Star Trek and Star Wars has got more heart, more soul, and more character than anything that we've seen in recent years. You know, and I don't want to look at it with nostalgia glasses, because I watched it and it is bad. In many respects, it's bad. But you have to factor in the limitations that they had. They were constrained. And a lot of the effort and energy went into getting over those constraints to tell the story they were trying to tell. And it hit all the notes that I want to hit with Intrepid. And that was, you know, the idea of a hero who does the right thing, but it doesn't always do it in the way that is expected of him. So even the people that don't agree with his barbaric ways can recognize that in his heart, he's a hero. He's trying his best, but he's not able to meet them where they are, because they've lived throughout the history of their lives. He's been frozen like a block of ice whilst the entire world's moved past him. And these are feelings that I can really relate to. So this brings me to my next topic, my next issue that I wanted to talk about today. So we're going to switch back to comics, and it was this. And it just got me thinking. It got me thinking a great deal about what's happening in modern culture. And this channel has been kind of trying to figure out what happened in between 2007, when I stopped buying comics. But from around 2006, 2005, 2006, 2007, there was a sea change in comics. And the modern comic as it is now was born. And this is the epitome of modern comics. Now, the reason I'm showing you number 2 is because this is where I started, and it just made me realize something important that I need to bear in mind as a writer. Stan Lee said that you have to remember that every comic that you write will be somebody's first comic. And this is my first comic of Commanders in Crisis. This was my first doorway into what this story was. Now, I knew vaguely something about it being to do with presidents, but I didn't know exactly what it was. So, you know, we got this beautiful... not a lot of emphasis is put on how beautiful comics look nowadays, but you have to bear in mind how swish and swanky they look. This is high-end looking thing, you know. It feels luxurious. You've wasted 2 pages on just the credits. It's like, wow, this must be a great comic. Then we get another page of the story so far. So that's 3 pages in. We're 3 pages in. Tells us the story so far. And basically the multiverse has died. All the multiverse of different versions of Earth are being destroyed by some event, and this is it in action. And then we see the President of the United States down here, and he's being ushered to safety whilst this storm's destroying the entire world. And it doesn't feel cataclysmic. And one of the things that this book is about trying to look at an event crossover, or tell an event crossover story. But instead of there being any supporting titles that run alongside it, it's just, this is an event title with superheroes that you don't know. And so, yeah, that's the concept. And it could be done well. It could be done, but I don't know whether it's worth pursuing to be done well. And whether this book does that is completely up to the viewer. So, yeah, so then the president is being rescued, and out of nowhere he is pulled off out of his existence, and then he is transported and given superpowers, and he arrives on Earth, this our Earth, or a Earth, an Earth. And you might be confused as to what's just happened. 1 minute he's tumbling into the abyss, he's about to get superpowers, and then we are here. So we're about 6 pages in, and we're looking at a murder scene. It feels like we've gone from a cataclysmic world-ending event to a police procedural. And this is only one of the many issues that I have with the way that this story unfolds. So these are the main characters, and there's nothing in this that screams main character. But when you start to read the plot, oh yeah, okay, this is the Crisis Command people, okay. Anyway, then we see them in action. Now, it's not clear whether we've gone forwards, backwards, at the same time. This is 2 of the other Crisis Command characters. Now, I believe that this guy here is this guy. So this must be a different time. So it's beginning to feel quite disjointed, and I struggled with it, but I struggled through. Got a shot of a man scratching his balls there. Not quite sure what we're doing. And then we're jumping all over the place now. So now we find out, he's gay. Okay, that was interesting. So we've had no character development. We've had no introduction. This is, a Jim Lee comic back in the 1990s. You would have a group shot, and then you'd have all the names around them, and then they'd be talking about something that happened in the last issue, and then the few pages would move on to the next part of the story. We're not getting any of that. So I remember reading this and thinking, what the hell is going on? This is so hard to get into. But I was picking up on it. And then we get these superheroes, and there's none of these superheroes. I actually quite like their powers. I'm interested in their powers. The surgeon guy is interesting. He's the only interesting character. But the others are boring and dull. And their powers are boring and dull. And it feels like a poor attempt at a Vertigo story. So I thought, well, that was a bad comic. But I'm not going to judge it on its own merit, because it's number 2 in a series. And that's, I'm a forgiving guy. Let's have a look back and try and figure out what makes this book so good. So one of the things that was missing is we never got the introduction to the characters. We never got who they are, who they were. So here's Crisis and Commanders 1 that I sought out. Same cool layouts. This time we got the introduction. This explains what this is all about. You can pause this and have a look at it. But basically what it says is, this is an event comic told from the point of view, instead of having to bring in characters that people know, you just make them up as you go along. Excuse me. Oh, look, another police procedural. So the first page of the first issue is exactly the same as the 4th page of the 2nd issue. There's no lead in. We are looking at a murder scene, some kind of vampire attack. Then we switch to politics. Then we're in the Crisis Command think tank. And I don't know if this woman's a baddie or a goodie. We've got the guy in the background. And then we cut to a superhero fight, and they're fighting somebody. We've got Originator. Innovates vocabulary, alters reality. Innovates vocabulary, alters reality. Okay. Seer, Quantum God, 1 minute at a time. Sawbones, Action Surgeon. He's actually my favourite out of all of them, because his powers are ridiculous, but he's a dick. He's the Gambit. He's the dark, mysterious character he's supposed to be. And then we've got Prize Fighter. He's basically the Superman. He's as strong as the crowds hope he is. And this gives you a little insight into the mentality of the writers and what they view, how they view this. They're trying to go for the kind of well-established tropes that are present in manga and anime, but it doesn't really translate over to American culture that well. So yes, people would be familiar with it, but it doesn't actually work so well in American comics, because we don't have shared values. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So there's nothing so far in the 2 issues that's really kind of brought us to love these people, or even understand what it is they're doing, what they're fighting for, what the motivation is. But essentially, the 2 murder scenes are an idea, a concept has been linked to a person, and then that person was murdered. So empathy is dying all around the world and throughout the multiverse because empathy was murdered. I'm going to let that sink in for you for a minute. Just think about how that would affect the story if empathy has died. Think what that would do to character motivations. If you've thought about it and then you carry on reading, you start to realise that maybe that would explain a lot of the crazy rights. So we have prize fighter. He's gay, if you didn't know, but he rescues somebody and then he decides it's totally acceptable to snog them in public. I can't imagine Superman rescuing a woman and then snogging her in public if it wasn't Lois. Would be a smart move, from a lawsuit point of view. But anyway, we live in whatever world we're living in now, and whatever world this is. So then it becomes quite clear that this is now at this point when I was reading this issue, I was like, I kind of know what they're getting at here. What makes these characters beloved is this. Noah Rogue, prizefighter, on Earth J, America's first gay president. Okay, he's the gay president of Earth. He's worked his way up to the top job. He's a responsible leader, and he understands the game he's playing, optics, all of that. So going back to the scene where he just snogged a fireman that he saved, this is a president doing that, an ex-president doing that. Okay. Again, then the next character is Seer, and she is first black woman president. Okay, that's convenient. The next one, Ignacio Mendez, first Latinx president. I don't know how you feel about Latinx. If there's any Spanish people watching, let me know in the comments how that makes you feel. Then we got Originator, Earth's first, America's first Pakistani president. You can see where we're going with this. Oh, and then we get the red-headed girl. A lifetime ago, the first woman president on the Earth that they are currently on. So we've got an ex-president who's now a superhero in a team with ex-presidents from other multiverses. I don't really want to talk about it anymore because it's ridiculous. And now, I don't know what the values of this were. I don't know how. I mean, this gets passed. This is the sort of thing that gets passed off as inclusive. But there's nothing inclusive about it. And the reason I say that is because when I was talking about this was watched by millions of people all over the planet in syndication episodes down the line. People know Buck Rogers. Buck Rogers was a character that was heroic. He had tendencies. Not every human being in the world could become Buck Rogers. He was an avatar for the human race in the distant future. You could pin your hopes and dreams onto him. He was a heroic and brave. But nowadays, all they see is all that these people can see that pass through DEI filters is white cis male. And I hate the word cis, and I'm only using it because that's their word. There is no such thing as cis. We all know this. It's not a real word. It's to deal with molecular opposites, and it only works at that level. It's a commandeered from another concept. So we are looking at people, and the only merits that they have that make them worthwhile to be loved or respected in the comic book is their race, their sexuality. That's it. That's why we're supposed to like them. And I can't tell you how undescribably lazy that is. When you're trying to tell an event, you still have to tell it through characters. When you spend 2 or 3 pages establishing that they're homosexual or that they're a president, at the end of the book, you're trying to explain these characters. The story does not support this level of interest because you're not making the characters interesting to me. Now, I will say this character, she's got some cool powers. And this guy like I say, he's really cool. The idea of a surgeon who's also a running gunner, but these are also presidents, and you're trying to balance all these impossibilities in one comic book. It is a massive task. Now, I don't know if it's still going on or not. I'm not sure if it's been cancelled or if it still continues on. There are some great ideas in here, but it's let down by, I'm sure it's more in the execution. But the thing that questions me about this is like, who's it for? It feels like it's taken a look at the society we live in and targeted the smallest demographic you could possibly find. I need a political thriller with superheroes in it, and they all have to be DEI friendly. It feels like a cross between a DEI pamphlet aimed at kids and a Netflix special. It doesn't feel like a comic book that's aimed at regular comic book readers. And I've got to say, I struggled with it. I struggled with it, and when I look at it now, I still don't understand it. I don't really know what it's about. It just feels like lots of emotions thrown into a comic book and given a veneer of superheroics. But it's about something else, and I can't understand it. So obviously it's not aimed at me as an audience. So I'm not going to say it's a terrible comic book like I would with any other comic book. This is genuinely not aimed at me, and I just... The part of me that's trying to understand what's gone wrong with modern comics, I suspect this is it. It's packaged like it's aimed at me. It looks like something that I would read. I mean, the first one on here is clearly a homage to or touching on the touchstone of comics being Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's got that same vibe. But when you open this up and start reading, it's not for you. It's not. I don't know who. I don't know how comic book companies create their demographics that they target, but if they were creating a demographic for this, I don't even know what you would call it. Is it an LGB book? Is it a book for all? Is it young adult? Is it? I don't know who they're selling it to, and I don't know who it's for, and it confuses me. Its existence confuses me. Its story confuses me. The way it jumps around to random events and random places in the middle of a cataclysmic event that's ongoing and tearing apart the multiverse. It's strange. And it is jarring. And it's just an interesting touchstone when you look back on trying to figure out what it is that's actually gone wrong. And I think maybe that's it. It's a values thing. So you've got no shared values between your audience. They're so fragmented, and you pick concepts that only work for a tiny fraction of that audience. Image serves up a lot of people in marginalized communities. As I say marginalized communities, I'm doing air quotes, you can't see. What we consider a marginalized community. I tend to think that what people consider a marginalized community is what generally white progressive types think a marginalized community is. I don't know I don't know whether I would be considered a marginalized community. I'm not white, so maybe this was meant for me, but because I'm not a Pakistan, I'm not American, I'm not African American, I'm a brown guy. I just don't know. I don't know who this is for. It just feels so narrow, and it feels so specific to a specific thing. I just can't get my head around who it's for. So anyway, that's my takeaway on this book, and that's my takeaway on stories at the moment. The juxtaposition that I was trying to make with the book Rogers is connected to my book Intrepid. That's where my heart is. My stories are about people who are actually heroic, and I don't care about their lives. They are just a vehicle for me to understand the world they're looking at, how would they act? How would I act? I can't get on board with this. I don't understand if this was me, what would I do? If I was an ex-president of the United States of America and then I ended up in another universe, I probably would expect the same. I'd want the same things. I want power again. ambitious people, they want act a certain way, they wouldn't become superheroes. But the thing is it's just implied that because of their status as minorities, they are just great people. And obviously we don't know why they were chosen, so maybe that all gets answered and maybe there's an explanation for it. But at the moment, it makes no sense. And this is not a book for me, and I'm not reading past this. So if you've read this book and you think it's good, I'd love to hear what you think's great about it, because I just don't get it. And if you really enjoyed this book, I really would love to hear from you. And I'm not saying that, for me, it makes no sense. So I'd really love to know and understand what it is. So anyway, in closing, my book Intrepid is going to be out next year, early next year. It's being fulfilled. There was a campaign on Indiegogo that's going to be fulfilled first. And then once it's done, we're going to be looking at getting it into shops and putting it on Amazon. So keep an eye out for that. Yeah, and thanks for listening. Let me know what you think. I'm fascinated. I would absolutely fascinated to hear what people think. Was this a good first comic for you to pick up? Would you recommend it to anyone? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Why? All right. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye.